Okay, hi friends. Sorry we're late. This is World Maker Books reading EarthSong Overture by Mark Wandry. We will be giving away a couple of these at some point in the next couple of weeks. Let's see. We are going to hang out for about one more minute since I'm running late. I usually wait until 5 after to start reading. And because the last stream froze at an odd time, I'm going to back up a little bit to the beginning of chapter 20. Or maybe a little further back. Nope. Yeah, I think we'll start at chapter 20. Are you already on there, Mark? Whoever's on here, say hi. No, we'll start reading in just a second. Sorry, I forgot until the last minute that I have to have Christmas cookies made for an exchange tomorrow, so you'll hear beeping in the background as Mark continues to cycle through the dozens of trays of Christmas cookies that this one recipe makes. It's called Ginger Pennies. One recipe makes, okay, then leave them sit for a few more minutes. And just whatever's in the oven, when it comes out, be done for now. Leave the oven on, but don't put any more in, and I will take care of it when we're done reading.
What about this tray here? Can I use this tray?
The round one?
Yeah.
No, there's a square one in there.
This one?
No, don't use that one. Okay, thank you for your patience. We are going to start here at, let's see, I got to find something to fidget with, or I'm going to pick my hands to pieces. All right. I've got my trusty fidget putty. Chapter 20, May 11. The portal dome hadn't been that crowded since shortly before they built it. Osgood, how could it be crowded before they built it? Okay. Sorry. Osgood had to banish dozens of people, regardless of their position, to give those who needed to be there room to work. Every team was running tests, all of which confirmed nothing substantial had changed. However, lots of unsubstantial things had. As Osgood had noticed, the lights were no longer lit. No trace of their existence remained. The portal still popped up when someone stepped on the dais, though it only stayed there for 2 minutes. The symbols flashed and changed just as before. A dozen men and women were analyzing the strange woman's movements on a pair of high-definition images projected on a blank section of portal wall. As he was a witness to the event, the NSA grilled Osgood for more than 2 hours. They were still questioning the guards. He knew the strange woman's appearance wasn't their fault. The camera covering the door didn't show her arrival. However, neither did the camera covering the side of the portal facing the communicator. A review of the footage showed the portal coming on by itself, and 8 seconds later, the woman walking around from the far side. According to Occam's razor, there was only one possible conclusion. The woman had arrived through the portal. The soldiers on Bellatrix had stated dozens of times that was impossible. The device only went one way, yet there she was. The cameras captured perfect facial images, both from the front and in profile. They could find no match in any government database. Osgood, slightly suspicious, checked the images against Mindy Patoy's, whom the woman resembled. Results showed a 79% match. Plus, the young astronomer had been in her hotel room a half-mile away under lockdown when the event happened. Whoever she was knew far more about the portals than anyone on Earth. Portal camera and light rig are ready, Atek announced. Good, Osgood said. Let's find out what's going on over there. After activating the portal and confirming it only stayed open for 2 minutes, they'd confirmed the laser transceiver was missing from Bellatrix's side. Osgood had a deep sense of foreboding about what they'd find. A man holding a high-speed digital camera mated to multiple directional LED lights quickly mounted the dais and approached the dark portal. He shouldered the rig and activated the camera and light. Brilliant illumination flooded through the portal, none reaching the back wall of the dome. That much hadn't changed, at least. I can see detail, the man said. Put it on the projector, Osgood barked, pointing to one of the big wall projectors frozen on the strange woman's face. The image switched to the camera view, which showed a pattern of white broken by horizontal gray lines. The operator panned around, and occasional vertical lines broke the pattern, though only between 2 lines, never proceeding. Pull back, Osgood ordered, and the man did. Further back, the pattern made more sense. It was bricks. They saw a brick wall as the view panned as far as it could to the left. To the right, the wall went away before turning to make a second wall. Up, Osgood urged. Quickly now, you're almost out of time. The man pointed the camera upward to show beams and stone or a concrete ceiling. The beams looked corroded in places, and there were cracks in the roofing. Looks old, someone said. After a few seconds more, the portal went out. Osgood cursed. The 2-minute limit sucked. So it's true, he heard the familiar voice of Agent Mark Volant. Someone broke through security and fucked up the portal? In a manner of speaking, Osgood said, waiting impatiently while the man with the camera clambered off the dais, then back on to restart the portal. He explained to the NSA agent what had changed. How are our people over there? Volant asked. We have to assume they're still there, Osgood replied. The images coming from the portal distracted him. Not much was visible of the floor. It looked like the portal was in a room slightly larger than the dais. They certainly couldn't see a forest grove anymore, and there was no sign of the military people who'd gone over. Damn it, he thought. What did that woman do? What now? Osgood glanced at the man. His body language was skeptical. We send someone over, Osgood said. Is that smart? You'd rather sit here and wait for the killer lawn dart? Volant narrowed his eyes and considered his answer. Osgood decided he had better things to do. Volant had spent most of the morning trying to write a report for his superior about what he'd seen. In charge of the security side of the operation, he'd gotten the image files immediately from the Portal Dome server. Like Osgood, he'd thought the woman looked like Mindy Patoy. He'd sent a pair of agents to verify that the woman was in her room. The security bugs confirmed she'd been sitting on the couch, working on her computer, and the tap on her internet access showed nothing unusual. She'd been reading accounts of the survivors closest to the New Delhi explosion and something about global temperatures dropping by a degree. Volant didn't care. He knew it wouldn't matter, even in the short term. Still, a nagging suspicion lingered in the back of his mind. Could NASA be playing a game? He wondered aloud. Volant's director was livid, as was whoever sat above him. After the Excalibur fiasco, a lot of powerful people were lining up to come to New York, a visit that was now in limbo. He was completely behind the idea of sending someone to the other side to see what was going on. It was an easy way to validate the scientist's story. Had the portal moved? Where on that alien world was the portal now? Was it close enough to resume operations? He'd advised waiting to see what happened. The others didn't agree with him, but he had broad discretionary powers from the director. His report completed, he returned to the Portal Dome. An hour later, a soldier trained in reconnaissance and survival was ready and waiting just off the dais. His pack wasn't nearly as humongous as the one carried by Steve Edwin, and he carried an M4 carbine with a full load of ammo in one hand and another laser transceiver in the other. The transceiver was an improvement over the previous one, with better instruments. He wore a headset under his hat. The name patch on his uniform said Wells, and he had first sergeant stripes velcroed to his sleeve. Tim, he said, shaking Osgood's hand, I understand there's some question about the destination? Osgood nodded and explained the situation. The soldier listened attentively, nodding his head in places. Okay, got it, he said when the scientist finished. You're still good with going? The man looked down at the U.S. Army logo embroidered on his chest and tapped the emblem with a gloved hand. This doesn't come without risks. Osgood gestured toward the portal, and First Sergeant Tim Wells mounted the dais. The handling team moved into place, and he stepped through. He put the laser transceiver down, aiming it at the one on Earth before moving clear. The handling team maneuvered to the front of the portal, picked up a crate, and let it fly. With a resounding clang, the crate rebounded from the portal and clattered across the dais and down the stairs, coming to rest next to Osgood, who looked down at it with a mixture of surprise and amazement. Well, that never happened before, he thought, as he activated the headset. Are you okay? He asked through the laser. Yeah, came Tim's reply. I guess no extra supplies, huh? Osgood shrugged. It was all he could think to do. The air has a strange, sharp smell here. Osgood cast a questioning look at one of his science team to see if they had heard that before. He knew they hadn't. Did you get all the ones out?
Yeah.
Thank you. Just asking.
I loaded another one in.
Oh, you did. The air has a strange, sharp smell here. Osgood cast a questioning look at one of his science team to see if they had heard that before. He knew they hadn't, as all previous reports said Bellatrix smelled like the California redwood forests, with a hint of cinnamon. They shook their heads, confirming what he already knew. Okay, Osgood said. Look around and get back to us as soon as you can. On the other world, the man nodded. Next contact in 20 minutes. The man looked down at his watch, gave a thumbs up, and turned and stepped down from the dais. The portal deactivated at exactly 2 minutes. The science team began analyzing the data from the sensors on the laser station the sergeant took with him. What do you have? He asked them, walking over. It's not the same planet, the team leader concluded, and began listing items. The temperature is considerably higher, humidity is almost non-existent, oxygen is 26% lower, and carbon dioxide is 10% higher. There's a lot of argon, and background radiation is 200% higher. Osgood's eyes widened. The radiation detector can't tell if it's ionizing radiation. Out of view, Volant scowled. What's the probability of using this planet anyway? He asked. The team consulted each other, and one after another shook their heads. None, the leader summed up for him. There are too many strikes against it. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say the planet is at least partly sterile, maybe from a nuclear war. Guess that place is off the list, Volant said, turning to leave. What do you want us to do? Osgood asked him out of frustration. Fix it if you can, he growled as he left. I need to make another report. Osgood stared after him in anger. I hate that man. 5 minutes later, Osgood met with Skinner and explained the situation. There has to be a solution, Skinner said, watching the video of the mystery woman on his laptop. He'd been in the middle of nonstop planning meetings until the wheels came off a few hours ago. Osgood was a good scientist, but he had no idea about the level of the powers now involved. Skinner watched the woman's movements several times. Figure out what she did and reverse it. I'm going to make some calls and check on contingencies. Back in the dome, 20 minutes after Sergeant Wells passed through, Osgood stepped on the dais and brought the portal to life. The other side was dark, as before, the only light cast by a bank of LED floods aimed at the other side. Nothing else had changed, and there was no sign of Sergeant Wells. Osgood spoke into the headset anyway, as the transceiver had a Bluetooth connection with a range of 50 yards. Sergeant Wells, are you there? There was no reply. He tried repeatedly every 10 seconds until the portal disappeared after 2 minutes. Anything recorded from the other side? He asked the communications controller. It's working correctly? The controller patted the laser system and gave a thumbs up, then indicated the recorders and shook her head. We're getting atmospheric telemetry, the science team said. It's gotten 5 degrees hotter since we last checked, and the radiation level is climbing with the heat. He tried 5 more times before he gave up and handed the headset to someone else. Get me someone who understands cryptography, he said. We need to translate these symbols. He thought it would take a miracle to do so, and he also wondered what Skinner meant by contingencies. All right, there's a chapter break there. How's the cookies coming? Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Officials tried to keep the details of what happened the night of the 10th secret. Mindy found out about them on the afternoon of the 11th, at about the same time as rumors began to speed through the village. Stories varied from the followers of the Avatar breaking in and hijacking the portal again to someone coming back through and closing it so no one else could follow. Mindy knew something was up when the guards denied her entry to the dome. Returning to the trailer, she shifted papers and slowly did other stuff. She bided her time and dug for the truth. The rumors were mostly crazy, but she knew something big had happened. The looks of concern on the faces of the science staff supported that conclusion. Confirmation came when she got an all-portal team email. She was pretty sure she wasn't supposed to get it, but her clearance made her a member of the group. The intended recipients were a group of cryptographers joining the team. The email included a video of the strange woman's visit. In an instant, she forgot about her real job and became completely absorbed in the video. Who was the woman? Where had she come from? Judging by her actions, she obviously understood what the symbols meant. For the rest of the day, she found herself silently observing the email exchanges between the cryptography team and NASA's people in the dome. The back-and-forth exchange was full of anger, resentment, and frustration. The cryptography team wanted to know why NASA was just now consulting them, as officials gave them 1 week to decipher the symbols. NASA offered precious little detail, editing the images to control what the cryptography team could see. The cryptographers were intelligent people, and between the stories about New Delhi and various news reports, they knew something big was happening. Mindy had just checked her watch to see how long it would be before their escort arrived to take them back to the hotel, and was copying files onto her handy little jump drive when he opened the door and stuck his head in. "Be ready to leave in 5 minutes," he barked, his face etched with concern. "What's going on?" Samantha, the closest to the door, asked. "All hell's breaking loose on the island. A mob just set fire to most of Wall Street." There was a chapter break in the end of chapter. Chapter 21, Intermission. As the sun rose on the 12th, most of the world with access to news knew what was coming and that there wasn't anything the various governments could do about it. The governments tried to cover the truth in one way or another, with varying levels of success and failure. Within hours of Excalibur's demise, riots began to sweep the globe, breaking out in more than 100 major cities. Millions didn't report for work, either staying home in fear or preparing to flee in terror. Declared war on Israel, sending tanks rolling across the Sinai Peninsula. Within hours, Syria joined in the fighting. The Israelis expected this and met the advancing forces with withering fire and mowed them down. As the day advanced, thousands of burning tanks sent curls of black smoke over the Sinai. Minor conflicts flared all over the planet. One of the few areas largely unaffected was the Indian subcontinent. Those that survived the portal explosion were busy searching for food and trying to stay alive. Survivors in Kathmandu had been killing each other over stale bread for days. Thousands of refugees from Bangladesh invaded Myanmar in search of food and shelter. Roving bands of civilians, quietly led by government consultants, slaughtered thousands. The unused portals quickly became centers of activity. In Buenos Aires, the government had kept the portal a complete secret. On the afternoon of May 12th, they used all 144 transits in a matter of hours in a carefully coordinated, well-planned operation. 52 men and 92 women left Earth, all staggering under loads of tools, seeds, medicine, and other colonization equipment. All 92 women were pregnant, some very recently, and none by any of the men who were going. Every member held at least one advanced degree, some had many. The public never knew it happened. In Japan, the lights on the government-controlled portal in the dense wilderness of the Imperial Garden of Tokyo were out. A group had used all the transits without leaving a trace. Someone also used the portal transits in South Africa without anyone in the government knowing, as officials there were unaware the portal existed since it had appeared in a private park in Johannesburg. The portal in St. Petersburg had been under intense scrutiny by the Russian Republic, quite like the operation underway in Central Park. That evening, the rebel military elements launched a coordinated attack against the compound. There were extensive casualties, and the city became a war zone. After 8 hours of intense combat, the rebel forces took control of and quickly used the portal. The majority of those who passed through were military men, along with a few conscripted women. They took large quantities of weapons, ammunition, and survival gear with them. Loyalist reinforcements eventually retook the portal hours after the rebels used it up. The government publicly executed survivors of the rebel unit. As the sun set, the crew of the International Space Station admitted defeat and abandoned the vehicle in a pair of Russian Soyuz capsules. Hours later, the $100 billion station burned up on re-entry. From space, it looked as though many of the world's greatest cities were sparkling. It wasn't from electric lights, but from fires. End of chapter. Chapter 22, May 13. Detective Lieutenant Billy Harper sat in his dented, wheezing car at the corner of 3rd Avenue and 42nd Street, eating a chicken falafel. It had been 2 days since a delivery truck made it onto the island, and it didn't taste like chicken. The vegetables were stale, and the sauce smelled suspiciously close to spoiled. He devoured the sandwich quickly and fished out a couple of Tums from his jacket. Rain had pelted the city for the last day and showed no signs of relenting. Water dripped onto the dashboard through the windshield, shattered by a brick. Where'd they go? Oh. Very small hole. Shattered by a brick during his attempt to quell the downtown riot the night before. Billy hadn't been home in 2 days, partly because there were rolling riots around his house, and partly because the city needed every officer who would report. Almost 40% of them hadn't. The bridges were blocked and the subways shut down, but the feds were still letting people board ferries to leave town. The ferries leaving from the 3 Manhattan terminals overflowed. They'd return a couple hours later with a few feds, maybe a truck or two of food, and a few dozen people. Most people returned to get more of their possessions, packing them back out on carts, bicycles, or their backs. "Where are they all going?" his fellow officer Leonard Tall asked over the phone. Surprisingly, the cell phone networks were still running. "I mean, I can see them wanting to get out, only there's nowhere to go. I heard some crazy guy saying he read on the internet that the government has a huge underground bunker up in the Adirondacks," Billy said. Leonard just laughed. Billy could hear Leonard eating, and he hoped it was better than the mystery meat falafel he'd just consumed. "Any idea where in the Adirondacks?" Leonard asked. Billy took a sip of warm Coke and considered the phone, clipped in a hands-free holder on his dashboard. Leonard had a 5-year-old daughter, and his wife was 6 months pregnant. God, I'm just winning all the way around today, you guys.
You wearing
that? Yep. He hadn't... Sorry, hang on. Drainage again. Killing me.
Eat some of these. I know you're going to have enough of them.
Ooh, some of them are soft. Nice. Okay, sorry guys. Drainage is still an issue. And a major one at that. So I'll try not to gag while I'm reading. Leonard had a 5-year-old daughter, and his wife was 6 months pregnant. He hadn't said much about the asteroid. Most of the officers who stayed didn't talk about it either. "No," he admitted. "Why? Are you thinking about it?" "That would mean abandoning my post," Leonard said. "I didn't hear a thing." The line was silent for a while. Leonard finally said and snorted. "You can't get your car off the island, so what difference does it make? Can you see me trying to march little Shirley and 6 months pregnant Anne 100 miles on foot?" "No," Billy admitted. "I'm going to catch an hour or two of sleep." He said. Things seemed quiet. "You got it, buddy. Lock your doors." "Always." Billy hung up and checked the security of his car. For safety's sake, he took his backup Glock out of the locked glove compartment and tucked it under his right thigh, out of view but within easy reach. Then he grabbed his coat, wadded it up, and stuck it behind his head. Around him, the city was shaking itself apart like a Rube Goldberg contraption. He liked the sounds of the city, though, so he slept. In his dreams, he saw the pretty red-headed astronomer he'd apprehended trying to sneak into Central Park. She was his wife, and they were happy. They had a little house in Queens and 3 kids. The shrill wail of his radio woke him up. There were a couple thousand crazy people trying to take over the subways. No one knew why. They had gunned down 4 transit cops at the 34th Street Metro, next to Penn Station. All available units were responding. He checked his watch. Just over 3 hours had passed. That would do. Putting the battered cruiser into gear, he steered south and drank the rest of the now flat Coke for the caffeine. Halfway there, a call came in about 2 grocery stores being looted and ablaze at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The quiet had ended. "Honey, just stop and I'll deal with it." "Just stop. Lay it down, put it back in the bowl, whatever. I'll deal with it."
I'm squeezing shit out of it.
I told him not to do it. I told him it could just wait. Just set it down. It can wait.
I got 2 trays done.
As he drove, he thought about Mindy Patoy and the life he'd dreamed about. He had her number in his laptop. If he had enough time later, he might just give her a call. He didn't like the idea of facing the end of the world alone. Chapter break.
You're running closer to 7 now.
7. Okay. It didn't take portal access to realize that something catastrophic had taken place at the center of the project. More than 1,000 people worked in and around the portal camp, and hundreds had at least some knowledge of what it was. Up until the evening of the 10th, they had had purpose and direction. People knew it was a secret operation. They also knew, thanks to the way rumors migrated, even in the top secret community, The secret revolved around a way to save people. Exactly what that meant, not many really knew. Mindy knew, and those working with her knew that she knew. That little dome symbol on the ID she wore on a lanyard had a profound meaning to everyone working in the camp. It was like a religion around the dome, and the symbol on the ID granted the high priests and acolytes entrance to the holiest of holies. The badge meant she was an acolyte. She didn't like keeping her mouth shut. When she looked around her work trailer, there were no obvious security cameras or recording devices, which meant they were well hidden. The NSA was at the heart of the operation, and spying was in their DNA. The logistics work they'd assigned her to do after she discovered the planet on the other side of the portal was Bellatrix had ground to a virtual halt. Not that she'd ever done more than make sure truckers received the waybills and proper credentials necessary to pick up loads around the city and get them back to the island. The first day, she'd processed a dozen orders, all with cryptic number sequences to identify the goods. When she got in on the morning of the 13th, only one order waited. The use of numbers to code the goods made her smile. Whoever had the brilliant idea of using harmonized tariff numbers for security should have been working at Walmart. To Mindy, a licensed customs broker, the coded numbers were as good as neon signs. She'd used her picture tools days ago to drill into the supposedly secure system at the camp. She'd been ahead of the wave when whoever set up the network was still establishing security protocols. Thanks to her toolkit, establishing a dozen false network IDs with permissions varying from the lowest to the highest levels had been child's play. Now, with plenty of time and little supervision, the entire system was her playground. Only what she found didn't sound like fun at all. Officials had put a plan in place to evacuate certain key figures and personnel shortly after they revealed the portal's purpose. It surprised her to see who was on the list and who wasn't. There were 3 sets of personnel, and those on and off seemed to change daily. Since the portal appeared out of business, no one had touched the list. More disturbing than the list of people who would save humanity was the list of what they planned to bring with them. The early shipments, taken over by the soldiers, were incredibly well planned. They were heavy on guns and ammo, sure, but after she'd seen images of the Komodo sloths, she didn't begrudge them the weapons. However, the plans for the final 120 people and gear shocked her with their short-sightedness. The list included things like medical supplies and implements to grow food. But the seeds they planned to take were crazy. She was no expert gardener, but she knew that hybrids were a poor choice. The only live animals on the list were chickens and pigs. What were they thinking? And there were thousands of pounds of high-tech tools and other equipment that, when broken, would be nothing more than junk. It had the look of a list assembled by the most incompetent being known to man, a committee. Just like there were alternate personnel lists, there were alternate equipment lists, which went from bad to worse. One included 4 disassembled motorcycles and an ATV, none of which were solar or alcohol powered. They ran on regular gasoline. That version of the list also included 100 gallons of gas. She threw up her hands in frustration, making several people in the trailer wonder what was wrong. Mindy prided herself on being a goal-oriented person, and this was one of those cases that called for just such a person. That morning, she'd taken one of her false system IDs and modified it to allow Joe Straight to begin his own list. The authorization she created allowed Mr. Straight to delve into the inventory of all the equipment stored at warehouses under the purview of Operation Bifrost. She smiled at the name, which she approved of. Thanks to the way the goods were categorized and the fact that everything she needed was in super lightweight polypropylene shells, another good idea, they could be reused on Bellatrix, Mindy finished most of her tinkering in a day. She played Tetris with the weights and assigned each person 220 pounds of crates to take through with them. She put lighter stuff in Nomex and nylon duffel bags, which were also reusable. Someone on the project used their half a brain when they started using those. The problem she ran into was that a lot of the goods she wanted weren't in the immediate distribution chain, although the government bought almost everything the people had suggested before the committee could remove items from the list. Her scheme involved getting everything within reach without anyone finding out about her meddling. She set about that slowly, adding a few pallets to each truck. After the 10th, she started having trouble because fewer trucks arrived. The secure warehouses were nearly full, too. With riots all over Manhattan, she didn't dare put any of the supplies in a public warehouse. She got bold and started moving some of the crap back off the island. By lunch on the 13th, the first truck left Manhattan with gear on it. She ate her lunch as she watched the system, looking for signs of discovery. The food was getting bland, a bad sign. When the truck cleared the bridge, she knew she was home free. She issued the next dozen orders and moved on to something else. The big computer monitors she'd used to analyze star patterns now showed a mysterious red-headed woman in a lab coat making unusual sweeping gestures toward the portal. Repeatedly, Mindy played the images, studying, memorizing, and looking for discernible patterns. It was well after 8 p.m. before she looked up and realized the others were standing by the door, grumbling. She realized she was hungry. "Where's our escort?" she asked Samantha. "He never showed up," she replied. "They never brought dinner, either," another girl yelled. Mindy had been so busy she hadn't noticed. She'd eaten a protein bar from the stash in her desk for lunch. "Is the door still locked?" she asked. Several said yes or nodded their heads. "Let me call—" She started to say she would call Osgood when they heard the click of the lock. Everyone backed up. An agent opened the door, then took a surprised step back when he saw them standing here. "What's this?" he asked. "You're 3 hours late," someone said. There were mumbles of agreement and a few under-the-breath angry words. "If you haven't noticed, the city's a mess," he said, looking annoyed. "How could we notice?" another man said. "We've been locked in here all day." "Come on, when you get to your rooms, pack. We're moving you in the morning." "Where?" Mindy asked. "I don't know," he said. "Just be ready." Grumbling and mumbling to each other, they followed their escort out the door. Chapter break. Hang on a minute. Mindy had her Osprey packed and ready by 7 a.m. as their escort came down the hall, banging on doors. She considered herself lucky she'd sent almost all her clothes to the laundry the day before, and they were in her room last night when she got back. If they hadn't been, she'd be down to one set. Let's go, the agent said, beating on each door. He did a double take when he got to Mindy's door and saw her standing there. "What about our keys and the bills?" "Leave the keys in the room. Uncle Sugar's picking up the bill." "Who the hell is Uncle Sugar?" asked a man in the room across from hers. "The government," Mindy said. His mouth made a big O. Down in the lobby, there was a small circus in progress. All it was missing was clowns. There were at least 100 people who worked in the camp, bags in hand, wandering around and looking confused. The diminished hotel staff looked completely overwhelmed. Within 15 minutes, there were 5 NSA agents and more than 100 employees standing around. The grumbling and complaining rapidly increased. "Everybody shut up!" someone roared. All eyes turned to a man in a suit by the door, his lower left arm in a cast. Mindy recognized Volant. After a second, the room played the sounds of some shuffling and a few coughs. "That's better. Now, because of the deteriorating situation on the island, we're moving those of you who are vital to the program into the camp." "What about the rest of us?" someone yelled. Volant didn't react the way Mindy expected. He half smiled as he spoke. "Your services are no longer required." It was quiet for a handful of breaths. Then there was an explosion of outrage. A few people shook fists and moved toward the man. The 2 agents standing next to him pushed in closer. For a moment, Mindy thought it would get ugly as the boldest of them tried to assault the agent. But then he casually reached into his coat with his good arm and pulled out a pistol. That did the trick. Everyone moved back. "Good. Now we'll read off names. If you hear your name, come stand by Agent Anderson." A man held up his hand. "The rest of you may leave." For the next few minutes, he read names from a clipboard. After a few minutes, those not yet called became increasingly unruly. Mindy was among those. She didn't feel unruly. She felt a growing sense of panic. The loaded Osprey bag on her back started to feel heavier and heavier. "Patoy, Mindy," Volant finally said. Mindy gasped and let out a nervous laugh before she saw the look of anger on many of those around her and quietly moved toward Agent Anderson. Before long, Volant finished reading the names, and 2/3 of the crowd was not near Mindy. "Follow me," Anderson said. "Now." He turned and pushed through a side door. Everyone followed quickly as those left behind began to yell in protest. Outside on the sidewalk, a light rain fell in the warmth of the May morning. Mindy thought she heard a gunshot inside the hotel and a few screams. 4 police cars were parked on the street. NYPD police vehicles often looked like they had come from a used car lot, with numerous scrapes and dents on them. These looked more abused, as several had cracked or broken windows. One looked like someone had tried to burn it. 8 police officers waited by the cars. The men looked just as abused as their vehicles. Several sported bandages, and they all looked deathly tired. These officers are going to escort you to the camp, Agent Anderson explained. They will provide security. The city smelled of fires and rotting trash. Across from the hotel was a pile of garbage bags the size of a van. Mindy looked up and saw smoke drifting over the roof of the hotel. The situation had deteriorated overnight. Don't straggle. If you're left behind, we won't look for you. Everyone nodded, Mindy included. She had no intention of getting left behind with the city descending into anarchy. The police escorted the 30-odd people into a rough line, with 2 officers leading, 2 following, and the other 4 interspersed among them to keep the group moving. It was only 7 blocks from their hotel to the Portal camp, yet it felt like a mile. With the sounds of an angry crowd behind them, the assemblage moved along briskly. They were more than halfway there, Mindy in the center of the column, when she suddenly recognized a police officer near her, a young detective who looked just as disheveled and exhausted as the other 7. Still, his face was unmistakable. She edged toward him until she was walking next to him. "Good morning, Detective Harper," she said. He started and jerked his head around to look at her. It was easy to tell how tired he was, because it took him a full second to recognize her. "Miss Patoy," he said, his stubbly-cheeked face breaking into a grin. "Good to see you. I see you fibbed to me about wanting to get into the park." She felt her cheeks grow hot as she smiled back. Despite looking as ragged as he did, the man was still quite handsome. Remembering she'd only abandoned her longtime boyfriend a short time ago, she quieted the butterflies in the pit of her stomach. "Just a little fib," she admitted. They walked on for another block. "Are you on the project?" He gave her a sidelong look. "We're just grunt workers," he said. "Someone managed to get through to what's left of the department and requested escorts, so they sent us." "What's left of the department? What do you mean?" "You don't keep up with the news, do you?" he asked. She shook her head. "Most of the government is out of contact. The chief left on other business 2 days ago. As far as we know, a couple of senior investigators and the police academy commandant are maintaining the department as best they can. About half the force have abandoned their posts and run for a bunker in the Adirondacks." "Bunker?" He gave her a bemused look. "They have you guys locked up pretty tight, don't they?" He quickly summarized the story. "The TV and internet news keep running in circles, and NASA is just blowing smoke. Even the most trusting people in the government know that now." He shrugged. "What about you?" "I'm a cop," he said with conviction. "People trust me." He walked on and shrugged again. "Besides, I got nowhere to go." "No family?" "No, they're all gone," he said. "I was an only child." "Wife? Kids?" "Never found the right person," he said. They walked on for a bit. "I've thought about you a lot since we met." "You mean since you arrested me?" He looked at the serious expression on her face, but Mindy wasn't a good actor, and her face quickly broke into a wide grin. She chuckled. "I've thought about you a bit, too," she admitted. "I'd ask you out for pizza, but I don't know of any places that are still open." Mindy nodded. They probably wouldn't let her leave after this, based on the way they were treating her. "Are you okay here?" he asked. He asked her suddenly in a comforting and authoritative policeman voice. She looked at him queerly. "I mean, are you free to go?" "Are you?" she replied. "That's not the same thing," he said. "It's closer than you think," she told him. His eyes narrowed, an understanding look crossed his face. She got as close to him as she could without drawing undue attention. "There isn't anything in the mountains worth running to," she said. She briefly considered telling him about the portal, but decided against it. "That silver asteroid thing?" he asked. "They're not going to stop it, are they?" "No," she whispered back. The look of defeat on his face was heart-wrenching. "How bad will it be?" "Nobody knows." She wanted to tell him more, that she might have a way out, and that she wanted him to go with her, but she kept it all to herself. A few minutes later, a pair of U.S. Army tanks parked at the barricade around the portal camp came into view. They were almost out of time. As they approached the perimeter, the soldiers next to the tanks waved them forward. Mindy felt a slight tug on her Osprey backpack. "What?" she said. "Shh," Billy hissed and gently moved her toward the line. "Until next time." She glanced over her shoulder and saw Billy, along with the other officers, walking back the way they'd come. An NSA agent took charge of them inside the perimeter. The agent escorted them to a military bunkhouse trailer, their new home. There were 9 compartments in the trailer, each holding 3 bunks with storage space underneath. Several people were loudly complaining there wasn't enough room. Mindy, used to moving around, thought there was more than enough space. For the moment, she was the only one in her room. As she unpacked her Osprey, she found it. Detective Harper had tucked a police radio into an empty, unzipped compartment in her bag. Feeling a thrill of excitement, she turned it on and spoke into it. "Hello? I knew you'd figure it out." Billy's voice came through loud and clear. "You're sneaky," she giggled. "So I've been told. This is an unused frequency, but it can still be monitored. Plus, I couldn't get you a charger, so when the radio's dead, that's it. I'll check in with you twice a day, at noon and at 9 p.m. If you need me, call then." "Okay," she said. "Thanks." But there was no reply. Mindy flipped the radio off and stashed it in the bottom of the drawer under her bunk. 2 people came in a short time later, looking for sleeping space. She greeted them and went about making herself at home. Despite the grimness of the situation, there was a little smile on her face. All right, there's a chapter break and end of chapter 23. It's been 40 minutes. We'll go do the first section of this chapter. Chapter 24, May 15. Osgood tried not to slam the phone down and almost succeeded. He looked at the phone, then back at the computer screen. There were many confidential and top-secret emails displayed there. All of them told the same story about the asteroid formerly known as LM-245, and now known by the space community as the Anomaly. After 4 days of acting against the Anomaly, Excalibur's probe had accomplished absolutely nothing. The Anomaly's delta V had not shifted by so much as 1 meter per second. The formal summary written by the analysis team at NASA used such words as surprising and impossible. The prototype ion drive only generated a few thousand newtons of thrust, yet over 100 hours it should have succeeded in deviating the anomaly at least a little bit. Just like the nuclear weapons, the results were not what they expected. The conclusion was the worst. Based on this data, there are only 2 reasonable conclusions. One is that the anomaly is exerting thrust against the probe. This is unlikely, as no evidence of drives or visible engines is present. The other conclusion is that the anomaly weighs much more than previously thought, somewhere around several 100 trillion tons. 100 trillion tons, Osgood said, minimum. It was the weight of a small moon in a shiny little dart no bigger than Manhattan. What did it mean? Doomsday, that's what it meant. He looked sideways out the window at the dome less than 100 yards away. The only way off the doomed planet sat inside that dome, and it wasn't working correctly. He confronted a thought he'd managed to avoid until now. I might die here. He'd known he would be one of those to go across almost from the beginning, an unspoken agreement between him and Skinner. He'd even managed to forget that he was committing a supreme act of betrayal by not sharing the truth of the portal with his higher-ups at NASA, thereby ensuring he'd be one of the few. He could justify almost anything if he didn't have to look at the people he was dooming to death in the face. It was easier before Excalibur failed so spectacularly, revealing its true purpose. He scanned the reports from the encryption team before filing the emails with a curse. What had they accomplished? Nothing, that's what. The symbols matched nothing on Earth, naturally, and there was no context with which to undo what the mysterious woman had done. He simply didn't know what to do. Osgood took a bottle of beer from the little refrigerator under his desk, popped it open, took a long drink, and began calling up images of the symbols on the portal. He never drank in the morning, but it was all he could think of to do. All right, there's a chapter break. We're at 43 minutes, most of which we've been reading. We appreciate you taking your time to watch and listen. Again, we're reading EarthSong Overture by Mark Wandry. Next, this was an off schedule because I have a conflict tomorrow night. Usually we're Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. And so we will be back and see you Thursday. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks. Bye.